Connor Boyack and Daniel Harmon. It's such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thanks for having us.
So, you were an author of an extremely popular series of books, the Tuttle Twins, and you are the director of the now, I guess, incipient beginning cartoon series, the Tuttle Twins, which is, of course, based on the books. You know, Tuttle Twins, what are the Tuttle... Actually, who are the Tuttle Twins?
Who are the Tuttle Twins?
Let's start there.
So, the Tuttle Twins is a series of children's books that teach the values of freedom to young kids. And there's a boy and a girl character, Ethan and Emily. And through storytelling and beautiful illustrations, we tell the time-tested virtues that made our country great: entrepreneurship, free markets, property rights, personal freedom, the golden rule, and much more. And so we found that there's power in storytelling, in conveying these lessons that aren't taught in schools. If anything, quite the opposite is often taught these days in schools. And families really appreciate being able to sit down together, read together about values that they hold, that they want to talk to their kids about. And now they have a format in which to do that. It makes it easy for them to now have a dialogue, a conversation around the dinner table with their kids. It's shifted for our families reading the Tuttle Twins books from, hey, son, what did you do today? Oh, I don't know. What do you think about this? Oh, I don't know. To really engage in conversations about some important ideas and current events that the kids can now understand a little bit better and have a little bit of a language with which to kind of communicate what they think about what's going on in the world.
These books have actually sold incredibly well. There's a great appetite for the type of education that you're just describing, and it's also something that kids seem to be really into. In fact, I have a friend who has a 10-year-old who is actually reading one of the books which actually exposes logical fallacies and was using them in school, in fact.
Wow.
Right? So that's kind of an interesting element. Where did this come from originally? This is, 6 years ago or something like this?
About 7, yeah,
Okay.
7 years. And the backstory is I run what's called a think tank, a nonprofit that tries to change laws in favor of freedom. It's called Libertas Institute. And a few years into working with Libertas, I found myself wanting to share with my young kids what it is that Dad does all day for work. But how do you talk to a 6-year-old about socialism, or an 8-year-old about eminent domain, or how do I tell my kids what I do? And I literally went on Amazon trying to find books that would help me teach the ideas of freedom to my kids so that we could have a conversation about it, and came up short. There was nothing. And a buddy of mine, Elijah, who's now our illustrator, he shared the same perspective, that there ought to be something like this. He had young kids as well, so we teamed up on a first book. I actually came to FreedomFest with our first book and said, hey guys, we have this new book, and the response was phenomenal. And so now we've published over 24 books. We've sold over 2.5 million of them. We're doing a cartoon now. Clearly there's a market demand for what we're doing.
Let's jump to the cartoon then, right? So how did this all begin?
So Connor and I have known each other for a while, and when he published the first Tuttle Twins book, I bought it immediately for my kids. I mean, I'm a freedom-loving guy. I grew up with parents in Idaho that taught me about freedom, and I had an uncle that taught me extensively about the principles of economics and freedom. He ran a little private school that I attended, and his whole curriculum was based around teaching about the history of civilizations and culture and what happens to people when they don't follow these values. And so I had that same basis. I also have kids. I have 7 kids, actually. Wanted to teach them about this, and immediately when I saw the books, I was like, okay, I need that. I bought the first one, read it with my kids. We all loved it, and I've bought every book since. Then with the momentum that started building with all the sales of the books, and Connor deciding, hey, we need to turn this into a cartoon. He started putting that out there publicly. Then I approached him with my team, and we're like, no, I want to make it into a cartoon for you. That's something I want to do. So I have a background in content creation and in doing advertising with comedy. And we felt like that lended itself really well to being able to develop this into a cartoon. And so that's kind of when we partnered up. The market response has been amazing because we didn't fund it through traditional means. We pulled together enough money to make a pilot, so the very first episode, but then we used that in a campaign for crowdfunding. And we became the #1 crowdfunded kids show in world history. And we raised $3.7 million from over 9,000 people. And a lot of them who were saying, I don't care if I ever make a dime on this, because this isn't a Kickstarter. It wasn't donations. It wasn't, here, I'll put in this money for a t-shirt. It was actually an investment in the show. And a lot of the people were saying, I don't care if this ever makes me a dime. I just want to see this exist for my kids and my grandkids. So there's a huge demand out there for it.
Well, and that's really fascinating, actually. So this crowdfunding model that you're using, people actually own a piece of it. Like, it's like owning a piece of a film, basically, right?
Exactly, yeah. So part of what makes a kid's show successful is revenue from merchandising. In fact, 70% of revenue from Kid Show on average comes from the merchandising. If you look at properties like Toy Story or like Cars, the box office numbers are a small percentage, like maybe less than 10% of the overall revenue of the show. And so that's a little bit of what we're planning on with this, is to make it not only something really cool that can be used as a resource for parents to teach their kids about the principles of freedom, but that it's also a viable and sustainable business model. We want this to work as a great story that kids choose as entertainment over their options on Netflix, Disney Plus, and YouTube. First and foremost, because they just love the characters. They like the adventure, but then they're getting the education right along with it. And then they dive deeper into it with the books, with the curriculum that Connor's have developed. That's the idea.
That's fascinating. So, there's actually watching I guess it's the pilot, right? We have the twins basically wanting to make a little money for themselves with a lemonade stand. And I guess the kids club president, I don't know what the kids club is exactly, makes a rule, kind of somewhat coercively gets a vote done on it, that she can have all the lemonade she wants. I mean, it's funny, right? But you think, interesting.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit of a parallel of what we see now, where you'll have an elite few that are making decisions for many others, and they're doing it in a way that sometimes will, violate rights. In this case, we're showing how the violation of property rights can come into play. And so they're asking themselves, okay, how do we overcome this, where it's written in our laws that she gets all the lemonade she wants, so if it's a law, I guess it has to be right? And then they have a grandma that has a time-traveling wheelchair, and she takes them back in time to learn from Frederick Bastiat, the French economist, on the basis of the law, right, to protect life, liberty, and property. And then they start seeing, this, if it is violating these rights, is it really a law? And then they go see the application of that in the Wild West with a sheriff that's trying to protect the rights of one of the local ranchers and her cows. So it's just kind of a fun way of doing it, adding in elements of sci-fi and time travel and adventure.
And we all have a right to liberty, which means we can do stuff without people stopping us. We can say the things we want to say.
Like, Mr. Bastiat, you should wear deodorant. Ooh, that felt good.
Touche. Or go where we want to go.
Like church, or the deodorant store.
Okay, I get it.
Or do whatever we want.
As long as it doesn't take away anyone's rights or hurts them.
Aww.
Finally, we have a right to property, which means no one can take our stuff.
Like my collection of assorted gummy bears.
Or my wild yet practical planner.
Or my parking tickets. Oops, there goes my property. It's fine. They would expire anyway.
Right. Rights to life, liberty, and property are so important, they need to be protected. Ooh, that's good. I'm gonna write that down. And if they're not protected, people suffer. Quality of life declines, and this happens.
Well, it is what it is. Thanks for the salad bowl.
Take me with you!
If I can add to that briefly, one of the things that we're trying to do with the cartoon is not only, as Daniel said, have it be something that the kids want to watch over and over again. Like, they watch their movies right now 15 times. My kids are like, how many times do you need to watch that before you just have it memorized and you don't need to watch it again? But we want it to be good for the adults as well. There's a level of adult humor in there that we're getting some gags and stuff out of the parents. And so we want this to be a family experience. We want not just the moms or dads to, say, here's the iPad, go watch the cartoon. It's like, let's watch this together. And now we can talk about these important ideas, that it really fosters those conversations that so many parents want but don't have right now. They don't have that kind of shared language with their kids to be at that same level and talk about ideas, but the books and the cartoon are really facilitating that dialogue, which is so essential, I think.
Well, so Grandma is, I have to tell you, my favorite character. I love the kids, but Grandma is just fantastic. She's an immigrant, I think. She has a bit of an accent.
Yes. So some of the backstory that will be revealed in later episodes is that Grandma is an immigrant from Cuba. And so we all know what, the Cuban government is a communist government, and there's going to be lessons that will be learned from that. And so, yeah, she has a little bit of an accent, and the kids are quarter Cuban in this case. But yeah, that's kind of the grand plan for not just the season, but seasons to come, of kind of where we're taking this story and why it's so important for her to take these kids on journeys to learn these lessons.
So are the Tuttle Twins your kids?
So when we started, right, this was like guerrilla marketing. Like, I tried to grow this thing from the ground up. And so I used my children, I have a boy and a girl, in our marketing. If you go look on our Facebook page for the Tuttle Twins, you'll see, and you can probably even share here a clip of it on yours. We had my boy and girl doing this really cute videos, pitching the books and saying, we've learned a lot, so you should have your kids learn a lot too. And that led a lot of people to think that my kids are the actual Tuttle Twins upon which the books are based. They're not. However, in the books, we did model the personalities of the twins after the personalities of my own kids, but I don't have twins. My boy is 12 and my daughter is 10. The Tuttle Twins was really just, we wanted a boy and a girl so both boys and girls could relate closely to a character because we want this to have as broad appeal as possible.
Really smart.
I think you told me that in 2020, basically, your books got more attention, more sales than in all the previous years combined.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the lockdowns, I think, probably had something to do with that. But what do you make of this?
So in the first 6 years of selling books, we sold about 750,000 books total. And in 2020 alone, we sold 1.3 million books, which was almost double the entire past 6 years. And it really boils down to the fact that there was a tripling nationwide in America of homeschooling. So there's a ton of parents saying, we need curriculum. We need to know what to teach our kids. And then beyond just the homeschooling niche itself, so many parents, even if their kids are in school, we're seeing through like Zoom school, oh my gosh, my kids are learning that? Like, I don't want my kids learning that. Or the world was going kind of crazy and there's mandates and lockdowns and authoritarianism, and parents were seeing current events and wanting to figure out, like, how do I talk to my kids about this? How do I help them make sense of what's happening in the world? So all of that combined into this sense of urgency among families to say, like, what do we do? Where do we turn? And so on social media or from their friends, they'd say, like, go check out the Tuttle Twins books. And it really led to this uptick. And we're seeing it even still through 2021. Of course, things haven't really totally settled down in the state of affairs in the world. So the demand is definitely there, which is great timing, I think, for the cartoon to come out.
So, both the book and the cartoon, from what I've seen, are being marketed as kind of like your kids are being taught socialism and socialist principles. This is something that runs counter this. Let's talk a little bit about what's actually being taught.
So in school today, you have two problems. I call them the sins of omission and the sins of commission. The sins of commission are when the curriculum or the teachers are using propaganda or bias, and they're saying the founding fathers were all white supremacists, or capitalism is a moral evil, or socialism is great, collectivism is awesome, right? These are sins of commission where the system is pushing ideas onto kids. There's also sins of omission where the schools simply are omitting important information. Entrepreneurship, the golden rule, free markets, property rights, the Constitution, they're just not teaching this stuff. And so with the sins of commission and the sins of omission combined, that leaves a lot of parents kind of floating out there in the ocean feeling like, where do I turn? Where's my anchor? Where's my foundation? And that's what we see ourselves as offering, as a foundation of freedom to say, here are solid principles, a brand you can trust. Whether you're homeschooling your kids or you need to leave your kids in school for whatever reason, make sure that they're being exposed to these ideas so they can develop critical thinking, they can evaluate all those other ideas that they hear in the world, and really understand the ideas of a free society.
Some people might say, right, and I was thinking about this to myself because I've seen this happen a number of times, this is just another form of indoctrination. You're indoctrinating free market principles here, right? What would you say to people like that?
Yeah, I'd first and foremost say that every parent wants to pass their values down to their kids, regardless of what their worldview is. So for me, for example, I'm very much a free market guy, believe in freedom, voluntarism, all these types of things. I mean, I'm a Christian, and all that I want to pass down to my kids. I don't want to force it onto them, but I want to educate them on it so that they have at least an informed choice of whether or not they're going to follow along a similar path of some kind. And so all parents are looking for tools to be able to pass those values down, right? It's much more about teaching the principles in a clear and a fun way so that it will be a conversation starter with parents and with kids to be able to discuss these things. And in many cases, with the books especially, the parents are saying, I'm learning more than I ever thought I would. I'm finally understanding this in a way that makes sense to me. And so it really becomes a tool for families to be able to teach these kinds of things. And at the end of the day, I mean, if you want to get really philosophical on it, almost everything's indoctrination, right? If we're passing an idea down to one person or another, it's all indoctrination in some way. But it's more, I think, about the intent behind it, which is very much empowering parents to have tools to be able to teach their kids and have these conversations with them.
I would just add briefly to that to say, building off of what Daniel said, intent matters. What I mean by that is indoctrination or propaganda in the negative sense is this is the right way, this is only the right way, you must believe this is what everyone has to believe. That's not what we're about. We're about fostering dialogue. We're about critical thinking. We're about empowering parents to share with their kids the ideas they already believe in. Like me, when I got started with this thing, I wanted to share with my kids what the heck Dad did at his think tank, and I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the language. I needed help. We got books for helping you talk to your kids about potty training or sex ed and all these things, right? Because these sometimes awkward or controversial ideas need to be simplified so that kids can understand and grow into maturity and understand bigger ideas. Why in the world should we not have that for the ideas that have made the world, a free society for the nations that have adopted these types of principles?